We've forgotten that there's a God that we have to answer.
Dealing with people who reject truth.
I'm wondering in my mind why life is so difficult for me.
340 million people who are suffering.
Real stories.
Here's a man who's responsible for almost 7 billion people.
Real issues.
How much does peer pressure actually exist?
And real views.
Gangs exist at every level.
This is Real Talk.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Real Talk USA. Today's topic is depression amongst teenagers. A serious topic, one that has been amplified by the world of social media and seen with the increase in teen suicides that is viewed in the media today. Before we get started, let's check out the word on the street.
Picture a classroom and a student named Rashid. Rashid is an A student throughout high school. He is always in the good books of teachers and friends. He is a good sportsman and actively participates in games and extracurricular activities. He is very social and interacts with others with respect. Rashid is doing excellent as a young, promising boy. A few months have passed, and a strange change was taking place in Rashid's dealings. Teachers start noticing that Rashid is spacing out during the lectures, has started becoming more quiet and introverted. Rashid's homework is not done and his grades are diminishing. Teachers notice that during the lecture, he tears up suddenly and his facial expression changes. At dismissal time, it seems like he is not in a hurry to go home after school, as if he is not welcome back home or no one is anxiously waiting for him. The counselor calls him for a visit. "Everything's fine," Rashid answers and tries to divert the topic to some trivial issue. The counselor assures him that he is on his side and he wants to help him. He also emphasizes that this discussion would remain secret. The school counselor keenly listens and tries to reason with Rashid. He knows that Rashid is not keen on sharing his problems with everyone and feels shameful, so he treads carefully. The school counselor advises him to see the school psychiatrist to empty his mind, but Rashid is scared to confide in strangers and is worried about what others will think of his family.
Welcome back. And to help us discuss this very important topic, we have our panel. I will start with Dr. Craig, who is a professor at Northampton Community College, Lehigh Valley, teaching a course on death and dying. His undergraduate work at University of California, Berkeley was about developmental psychology. And next to him, we have board-certified nurse practitioner Lynn Parker, who deals with treating pain, emotional, mind, body, and spirit, all included with that. And next to her, we have Dr. Irfan Al-Adin, a pain management physician certified in manipulation under anesthesia, and also expert in physical medicine and rehabilitation, as well as chemical detox. So to get our discussion started, it would be best if we can get an understanding for what exactly is depression defined as. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Craig to start us off on what you would consider to be a good starting ground for a definition.
I would not start the issue in terms of a formal clinical definition. To me, the issue is what we see across society of teenagers withdrawing from their classmates and even more radically from their parents. And in that withdrawal, we see them going into depression that becomes a serious problem for their life at that point and for their future.
Okay. Nurse Lynn?
I think the DSM, the Diagnosis of Psychiatric Medicine, to say that depression has clinical factors which include a lack of joy, withdrawal, maybe a decrease or increase in appetite. In teenagers, you'll see more agitation and anger. They'll be more critical, and and act differently and interact differently. And maybe I'm describing the symptoms more than giving the definition of depression, which is an alteration in mood that leaves one feeling as though they can't interact with their own life and they don't have the energy to participate in everyday life activities. And I think that's the shortest definition that I could give.
Okay. And Dr. Irfan Aladdin?
I think Lynn hit it on the head with the emotional detachment. There are other features. Also, sleeplessness is one of those features. Agitation, anxiety are associated features. And if it's under 6 months, we have a smaller condition known as dysthymia. And when it gets more than protracted over into a chronic state, more than 6 months a year, then it goes into major depressive disorder. And then there are also situations where you have mania cycling with depression, and that's a cyclothymia, and then that's also bipolar disorder. So these are some of the pathologies, but that's correct, DSM criteria, exactly.
So I'm thankful that today we have our audience here. I'd definitely like to open it up to them to see what their thoughts are about depression. I mean, we heard a very strong medical background of what the definition of depression could be or where we can start off. But what are some thoughts that the audience has in terms of what depression means to you and how you've encountered depression in your everyday lives amongst the people that you've come in contact with?
Jazakallah. I'm a resident assistant in college, and over the past year, I've had to deal with 2 residents who attempted suicide. There was cutting involved and other things of the sort. And I was just wondering, is it a buildup of events that happens in their lives, or is it more of something sudden? Because I and the rest of the community were shocked, and it wasn't something that was that apparent or that was like a lot of events leading up to it. So I just wondered how it kind of goes.
Anyone that has an answer can go ahead and start us off.
I think that both things can be true, that there are depressive disorders. Someone could lose a parent or someone very close to them, and it could have a devastating effect on them, and they could act out in all sorts of ways, become suicidal or violent, withdraw, use alcohol and drugs. Or it can be a long festering thing. Say someone's being bullied or they're being yelled at home, which is the equivalent of being bullied. When a child lives in a very stressful home where there's very, very heavy discipline and they're yelled at all the time, they become angry and frustrated. And sometimes, not to be dramatic, but to be dramatic, we turn on the TV and then there's Columbine, you know? Or then there's the shooting in Connecticut. And this has been going on for a long time, and when you talk to folks who've watched these kids, they say, oh, he was a little weird, he started withdrawing, he did this, he did that, but nobody put it all together until he shows up in the court. So I think that both things are true. It can be sudden and it can be over a long period of time.
And that is correct. And also depression is what we call multifactorial. There are many causes. For example, there's some genetic components. Some people are more predisposed to depression, or we have mania and, as we mentioned, bipolar disorder. But as far as depression is concerned, if there's a history in the family, there is some greater evidence or greater possibilities, as well as environmental factors, which are the key here, which can predispose towards an episode of an exacerbation or worsening of depression or manifestation of the symptoms. So basically an event, a very sudden event that is a tragic event, would precipitate that. So we have to look at both factors. If you look chemically, there's a deficit of certain neurotransmitters. Norepinephrine is one and serotonin is another one. These are some of the neurotransmitters that when they fall below a certain level, it manifests with sadness, with detachment, and in much greater cases, suicide. So these are based on these, that's why the medications that are often given are used to increase the levels of those neurotransmitters. Hence the name selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Your Prozac, your Paxil, Celexa, Lexapro, all of those.
I think that in college as well, when you look at exacerbation or making things worse, young people have more access to alcohol and drugs and to promiscuity than they would otherwise at home. And I think when young women are promiscuous, it leads to depression because they feel like maybe I did and then maybe he should have, and now they feel worthless and helpless, and you throw a little alcohol and a little drugs on top of that, it could be a really bad situation. And then you're in a new situation away from home where young people have homesickness and agitation and agita anyway. And now you've got alcohol, drugs, and some other situation. It's sometimes just too much to handle for them.
I would say on top of that, sociologically, our nation has moved from being proud of being free to being proud of being independent. It's me, myself, and I. There's no sense of collective wholeness that calls us to a healthy unity and care for one another. And I think that sociological factor plays right into these other things that we've been speaking of.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, one of the major treatments and the best treatments for depression is a social unit. Right. Listening, being heard, being accepted, being loved. And now young folks are into this. And this is their world. And the people next to them don't mean so much to them. So everyone's lonely and isolated, and their activity seems to keep them on the text message. You know, like every 30 seconds, if it doesn't ding, you feel some kind of way. You feel nervous if your text message doesn't go off in 30 seconds. And the people who are next to you who could be in union with you are ignored. So people are devastatingly lonely in the presence of a huge crowd and possibility of people, and then they have no social support when things go wrong. And we've also losing the art of how to talk to one another and how to actually bond. And young people are losing those skills, which means they're going to be you guys are going to be more and more at risk for depression because you don't know how to be social with one another, which is the biggest cure for depression.
Which I think brings up an excellent point about the social media aspect of it. Does the audience have any thoughts about social media and what kind of effects that you've seen personally happen in the life of loved ones or the life of friends that you've come across?
Well, I've seen a lot of things, especially on Instagram, where people make fake accounts to bully children who are 13, 14, and it's sad to see that. And they go into a state of depression, and they get really upset with themselves, and they try to change themselves. And the best thing you can tell that person is, you're beautiful the way you are. You are perfect the way you are. You don't need to change yourself.
My question would be related with how to deal with a person who is under depression. If that is, example, my working colleague, and he's taking those antidepressant pills, he's on prescription, so every day he's taking those pills, and beside that I'm trying to be friendly with him. Is there any trick or any way that I actually bring him to that point that he understands that I am his friend, or there is no hope for that kind of case?
I just want to say, I'm so glad to meet you, that you have compassion and empathy, and that you have the desire to be his friend. Because depressed people are very hard to be around. They're cranky, they're irritable, they're withdrawn, they're mean, they drink too much. They fuss, they push you away. So I think it's admirable that you want to be his friend and that you want to help him and you have concern for him. And I think that the most effective communication technique is to listen. Everyone really wants to be heard. The people that mean the most to you, that you reveal the most to, that you are the closest to, are the people that listen to you. So when the person says, well, I'm really sad and I don't care and I don't listen, when you try to cheer them up, they don't want to talk to you anymore. It's over. I've been clinically depressed twice in my life, and that's one of the reasons why I have such passion for this topic, because I've been there and done that, really seriously depressed. And when people are seriously depressed, they do not hear you. It's like you're talking through a fishbowl. It's like, what? And you're thinking, why don't they stop talking to me? They don't understand me, they don't feel me, they don't hear me, they don't know me. Just be quiet, let me be alone by myself. That's what the depressed person is thinking. You're annoying me by talking to me and trying to cheer me up. Go away. So when you reverse it and just listen and allow them to be, and not be afraid of their feelings, and not want to fix it for them, and let them have a safe place where they can express, they begin to talk to you. Maybe they'll talk to you too much then, because you'll be the person who can hear them. And then when you gain that trust, and you know, at one point I was really, really depressed, and my sister, who's one of my biggest teachers in this life on every single issue, every single time her spirit shows up, I was really depressed, and she said to me, I can't help you anymore. I'm your very best friend, but you're in trouble. Please let me help you by going somewhere. Please let me take you. And I let her take me because I trusted her, because she had listened to every single word I said, and I noticed she knew me. And I trusted her, and my life began to turn around. So I think that more than saying anything, being present and being listening and opening and allow them that space is probably one of the best things. And if you have to say something to them, do it really gently, without a lecturing tone, without an overbearing tone, and just say, well, maybe you don't know. Okay? Unless they're suicidal, then you call 911 and you interrupt their privacy. Folks who have a religious or God connection do better in every aspect of healthcare that you can possibly imagine. They recover better from heart attacks, they have less depression, they live longer, they're happier, they stay married longer. Everybody who just got a love for God and practices it and uses it in their healing and their conscious life does better. They have a better quality of life on every single score that you can do. Some folks are atheists. I'm not like hardwired like that, but some people are, or some people don't have as big a connection with spirit. And when you talk to them about spirit, it turns them off. They don't like it. It's invasive to them. Why are you telling me this stuff? It's not my culture. That's your idea. That's your God. And in this room right here, where there might be 4 or 5 different gods in this room. We might all have a different God in this room. So for me, as someone who deals with people from every single faith, every single day just about, you know, I'm in Middlesex County, treating the sick. So I've got the Buddhist, the Muslim, the Christian, the Jehovah's Witness. They all come in my office and want to convert me. They all tell me I belong to them. I say, I belong to only my God. That's me. That's my personal thing. See, I got a personal thing too. So I think when we talk about spirit, if there is no spirit involved and people don't have religion, then we need to be talking about kindness and empathy and compassion and just doing those own things from our own heart to be a representative of what the rest of us would call God. But in our humanness, if we don't have a higher power, we just act as if. Kindness, compassion, and spirit.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, so my question was, how do you see the growing problem of single parenthood in our society? Because it's laying the foundation of depression in little kids. And when the kid grows, when the foundation is being laid, the kid grows and the problem grows with it. And when they reach in their adulthood, it becomes difficult to take care of that. So isn't it, there are some, ways to stop that?
Relates to single parenthood.
Yep.
I think I can respond best by giving you an illustration. Some years ago, the state of Indiana was looking for a way to determine how many prison cells they would need to build for the next 20 years. They came up, after doing some sociological study, with this figure. They said they take the number of boys who read 2 grade levels below grade in the 4th grade, and then add to that how many of those boys come from a single family home, and that gives them the quotient for how many prison cells they're going to need to build. Because young people who go through school and are functioning then consistently below grade level feel marginalized. Young people who, especially boys who have no father figure, feel isolated. And they put those 2 factors together, and those are the boys then that act out. And they're acting out because it's difficult for them to find a job equal to their natural capacity, and it's difficult for them to relate to what society expects of them because they never had a model to show them what to do.
I had a question. It was said that people or teens are spending more time on TV, watching TV and playing video games or social websites. Why is that happening? Is it because computers are new, or do they offer something more than actual human interaction does? What are they looking for?
Dr. Irfan, did you have any comments?
Well, yeah, definitely, because the teenagers are looking for a source. Because they don't have that sense of community that I talked about earlier. They're looking for something. So the video games are there. And the video and all this electronic, the availability of electronic media is all there. And that's another reason why I think that you see more and more single parenthood, because if one of the members enjoys the videos or enjoys other features more than their spouse, then they get away from the core teachings. وَخَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا, and we created you in pairs. So you know that we were created in pairs, but because of all these diversions, you go away from that. Or هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنْ, that the man was created, the husband was created as a covering or a garment for the wife, and the wife for the husband. So if you have only one, then there's nakedness. So the point is that the two should be together, and in the same way, one person should interact with the community and react with his fellow being in order to limit depression, in order to limit these psychological disturbances, and also with one's creator. And that's what that study was, that there were two groups of people studied. This is JAMA, British Medical Journal. One group was told that in the hospital that somebody is praying for them, and the other group was told that you can pray on your own, but nobody's praying for you. The group that was told that somebody is praying for them had 40 to 50% greater recovery, more rapid and more complete recovery than that which did not, was told that there was no one praying for them. And that included in there people of faith and some atheists as well. It had many, many different faiths, in fact. So it's an interesting study to look upon.
Dr. Craig, you had a few thoughts?
I think there's just one other small factor I would like to factor into this process. The parenting process so often begins with busy parents who use the TV and the video games as babysitting tools. They plunk down the kids in front of the TV, and then they go about their business, and those children are taught that the safe place is front of the TV because nobody expects anything from you there and you're safe. And this really goes back, I believe, to parenting styles. Parenting needs to be an involved process with the child and the loving parent.
I think that this center and this event that we are a segment of today is a great representation of what we can do in terms of the single parent. We need community. Our community planners and our city planners are building Walgreens. They're not building youth centers and basketball courts and theater arts and art centers, and they're not building that. We just build malls to consume. And our communities don't have a real place for our families and our children to be, and we know that mothers are working at the rate of more than fathers now. There are more head of household women than there are fathers in the United States of America. And we haven't done anything in our communities to supplement that. So I think that in terms of the single parent, and that depression comes so much from powerlessness, from poverty, and from feeling lesser than. I think that a real combat to those feelings in children is exercise. It increases serotonin, it increases dopamine, and epinephrines, neurotransmitters. It makes you feel better, it makes you more confident. And I think we need centers where children can be working out, running, playing ball, and doing things that are creative, and that'll take some of the sense of powerlessness away and help them to view their creativity. And I think you all are doing a really good thing here this week in creating that kind of environment for the children, and we just need like 500% more of it.
Right. Well, we have a lot of those factors being addressed right here and right now. That's excellent. We have a few thoughts from the audience. Go ahead.
By the medical research in the United States or all around the world, is it anywhere proved that actually the way of the life of the parent or mother during the pregnancy causing actually the problem to the fetus actually, so when the baby is born, that actually because of the life before delivering, that baby actually suffering through the life and having the depression problems later on?
I think the biggest body of research that would bear that out would be the work that's done with the Holocaust survivors and what their children look like. And they're actually big 20, 30, 40-year out research projects on children who were children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. And those children have anxiety and depression and neuroses at about, I'm not sure of the numbers, I don't want to say them, but they at a much greater rate than the general population. So yes, right there in that big body of work, we see that what happens to the mom 1 and even 2 generations out is going to have an effect on her children. It's true.
And we know that also that when we read certain books, like those mothers who read Holy Quran when their child is in the womb, the children are brought up already loving Holy Quran, already loving spirituality. So that's why what is done when the child is in the womb by the mother and even by the father, if they have a loving relationship, that will be peace when the child is born. The child will be born peaceful. If there is a contention, that would have a negative effect on the child. So absolutely, there is a correlation there, very clear.
You got another comment in the audience, I believe? Yes, go ahead.
I have a question because I'm a parent and I have kids and my wife, and I'm thinking this is a serious problem among the teenagers.
Can you sit up just a little bit straight and just start the question over? Yeah.
I'm a father, and I'm asking from the audience how to avoid this type of problem in a family, like in a household. How did the audience, what they can advise me and my colleagues who has kids like teenagers and so on. They are going to school both day and night, going in and out, and we want how to avoid such depression in the family.
I think that's a good question. That we live such busy lives, it gets difficult to pinpoint actual solutions that we can come up with for depression, amongst our teens. So what are some, advice that you've come across, or, some advice that you would give as professionals in the field, Dr. Craig?
I think there's something that's as simple as the passive touch and holding and cradling. I was a teenage infantryman in Germany when the World War II ended, and we, as an American occupational position, found ourselves with hundreds of infants who no longer had mothers. And the American forces set up major nurseries. They brought over nurses that were specialists in child care, infant care. The American force did everything they could to work for those babies, and they found an incredibly high level of infant mortality. They were losing babies right and left, and they didn't understand it because they had the best trained people from the United States present. And finally, one nurse got a wise idea. She says, we are so busy doing everything that's clinically expected that nobody is with the baby. She said, who is holding the baby? And all of a sudden, the pediatrician, it snapped in his mind, and he put an ad in the local military paper and invited GIs to come in, grandmothers to come in from the community, and they assigned a baby to a volunteer. Within 3 weeks, the infant mortality rate began to go down. The answer was arms, and consistent arms. They weren't babies weren't traded from one to another, but the consistent arms of a caring person made a major difference in the livelihood of those infants.
That's exactly the thing. I know I have teenagers myself, and the love is the most important thing. Spend time, go out, whether it be for sports. A lot of sports is important. A lot of other activities in terms of games, and if you have TV or video, do it with the kids, not them on their own. And prayer together is important. That's why they say the family that prays together stays together. In fact, that's why it's important that you spend time, and then always praying for the teenager. It's very important as well, because as it is, we only have a certain amount of control. We do our best to show the love we can. In the end, it's the Lord who decides which way they go. You know that Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam's, Noah's wife and his son, he tried to tell us, look, get on the boat because it's the only way you're going to be saved. And he said, no, I'm safe here on this mountaintop. So you see, no matter how hard we tried, that was a prophet. That was a prophet of God. He could not control his son. And in the end, he drowned right along with everybody else. So in the end, we must try as hard as we can, but it's from above that the strength comes.
And with that, we'll take a short break and we'll resume our discussion after.
The Review of Religions is one of the longest-running religious magazines. In print since 1902, it continues to play an important role in presenting the noble teachings of Islam, reflecting its rational, harmonious, and inspiring nature. It features articles and viewpoints on different religions, making religion and religious philosophy accessible to a wider readership. The Review of Religions was founded by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be upon him, who claimed on the basis of divine revelation that he was the promised Messiah and Mahdi, whose advent had been foretold by the Holy Prophet of Islam, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and by the scriptures of other faiths. The annual subscription of this unique and enlightening magazine is just £15 per year or $30. To receive your copy of the Review of Religions, visit our website at www.reviewofreligions.org, where you can browse past issues and subscribe online, or contact us by email to info@reviewofreligions.org. The Review of Religions, a unique magazine of religious thought.
And welcome back. I want to just ask the audience, how many of us have had a personal, either a person that we know, a relative, a friend, a colleague who has gone through, depression? Anyone in the audience want to just raise their hand?
I had really the personal story, and I had my friend, and she was a very hard-working, hard-studying friend, and when she went out of the country, her parents were alive, but when she was studying out of the country, her father died from a heart attack, and after months before she came back, her mother got married to another man, and when she came back, and she couldn't get used to without father and seeing the new person instead of him. And after maybe I was talking to her, decide how to help her, but I really couldn't because she was really depressed. And after maybe 6 months, she made a suicide. So this is the. Also, I want to ask the question: does it the death of the father caused her suicide, or the act like the mother? How did she act after his death? That she got married, and she just drank the vinegar, a whole, not the mixed, and she died from that. So she was suffering from that, and this my question is that which one was the more that hurt her? That maybe I think that the mother. It's mother fault because maybe when she came back, she had to talk to her always every day, and my question to you is, what was the big fault, which and whose?
I don't know that anyone could ever answer that question. That is, as the doctor said, it's multifactorial. Her father passed away. Her heart is broken. She looks to her mother and to what's left of her family for comfort, and it's gone. It's shattered. And her mother has an investment here, which is a betrayal to her father and to her whole life. This is a compound thing. I met a woman who was in Tiananmen Square as a small child, and both of her parents were killed in front of her, and she was taken away. She told me this story as the head of obstetrics at St. Peter's Medical Center in New Brunswick, completely victorious. Who can say who is going to do what, when, or how, and who is going to survive this? Like you said, ultimately, like Noah's son. It's up to the Lord who is going to make it and who is not. And our hardiness, our put forthness, and ultimately our lives are up to ourselves. We ultimately make the decision, no matter what happens to us, to live or to die by our own hand. So who could say whose fault it is? Ultimately, it sounds insensitive, but she committed the act. when there were other choices. There was help, maybe there were other family members, maybe there was prayer, maybe there was meditation, maybe there was massage, maybe there was a retreat. She made this choice. So everyone played a part.
Every part that I think, it's make me think because it's a very difficult situation and very difficult to answer. And I will always ask myself, how to answer this question.
And just one more thing to that point. One definition of depression is repressed anger. If you repress anger, you will become depressed. So I think that we need to be able to vent our anger and to be able to speak about it, and maybe culturally it wasn't even proper for her to speak her anger at all. And yet she was festering with the betrayal of her mother in 2 or 3 different arenas and the loss of her father. And when someone dies, you're angry with that person for leaving you, especially when they leave you suddenly. That's a lot of anger to deal with. So I don't know, and for yourself as you move forward and you look at her mother and obviously the loss has bothered you and it still affects you and you're still asking why, as you move forward, maybe you could forgive her mother too in her humanness, and her mother didn't actually commit the act. The daughter did.
Dr. Craig, if you could address some of the, the dynamics that come into play when there's a suicide or when there's a traumatic event that's related to depression.
I first would like to address the gentleman who raises the question. I think your involvement with this needs to be dealt with on your side, because I hear an undertone that perhaps it was somehow partly your fault that you didn't do more than you should have done. And I think that would not be a wise way to go. I think you need to be assured that what has been said here makes it clear that there's a multi-factor involvement here. And many situations, what we need to do, I think, as a culture, is be much more proactive in terms of our care for each other. We need to be aware that I cannot make my decisions solely on what's good for me right now. This is my life. I'm going to do whatever I please. That is a dangerous way to live. And yet a high percentage of our society lives that way. There's only one person that's really important in this room. That's me. And you see, what that young woman was facing was her life folded in. And what we need to recognize is that she had options, as you've said. She had some valid options, but we haven't been taught how to look for the options. We haven't been taught that society is a collective unit that brings us many different ways to be nurtured and to be loved. And I think that's what every one of us in this room needs to be sensitive to. We're all participants in keeping suicides from happening.
I'd like to interject a fact into this room in knowing about the seriousness. You said we need to know how serious this is and that we need to be a collective and care for each other. Right now, depression is the #2 cause of disability worldwide. And you could imagine with catastrophes, wars, all sorts of things that human beings endure, it is the #2 cause of disability why people lose the ability to work and maintain their own lives. And by the year 2020, it will be the #1 cause of disability worldwide. This is a pandemic that is affecting us all. And as we look at media and we're closed in and closed down, I think that I went to a conference of, I'm a nursing educator, and it was all technology, and I cried in the conference. And one of the educators came to me and said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "I think this is the death of humanity. That we're in here instead of out here, trying to love and care for one another. This is really important that we come out."
But the key thing is your love for God must be greater than any other human being. Because if your attachment is to the human beings, then whoever it be, mom, dad, brother, sister, son, daughter, when they go, then you're going to be unraveled. But if your attachment is to the one who is eternal, then you'll never be unraveled. And that's why one who is a true believer would never think of suicide. Because that's why, remember the hadith is that if somebody dies through suicide, the Prophet would not offer his janazah prayers, would not even offer his funeral prayers, because life is such a great thing. It's the greatest blessing we have. And that's why with the Prophet himself, father died before he was born, and mother died age 6, and then grandfather age 8, because all of these things contributed to the fact that the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had his love greatest for God. And no attachment to any single individual, while he had so much love there, was never comparable to that of the love of God.
And I understand the underlying question is that, people who have a difficulty in coming out and actually admitting that they need help. Who here has experienced something like that, where they might have come across a loved one, a relative, a colleague, or somebody that they know who you can tell kind of needs help, but they are afraid to say something because of some of the cultural stigmas that are attached to people who might need help from mental illness? Who here has had an experience like that?
My question is that how do you know if somebody is going through, let's say, a depression and they don't want to come out with it? Because I have a friend who has bipolar disorder but didn't tell a lot of people, only told a few people, and he looks depressed. Like 1 minute he'll be very active with his friends, and then the next minute he'll be in a corner on his phone, and he gets more and more depressed when he's on his phone. So how can I help him, and how can I, be a better friend?
Again, gentle conversations, a lot of listening, and being present and available. Trying to understand where the person is at without any lecturing are going to be the best things. And when your person has a medical diagnosis, that's actually a private thing. This society does bias people because you have a psychiatric diagnosis. You can have cancer, they might hire you, but schizophrenia, not so much. Okay, it's a big stigma. So people coming out and saying, I have this or that, I don't know that we should be doing this, especially in an unkind society where people are already being bullied and being hurt. Maybe we can. But I think that the kindness, the empathy, the availability, the suggestibility, offering to do different events, to be out with the person and to keep them busy, because to have your mind off of yourself and your situation helps you with depression. To say, do you want to go here or do you want to go there? To try to involve the person in a physical activity, because again, exercise is the #1 treatment of depression, especially for children and elders. It works more effectively if you can get the person out and moving than do our SSRIs or our tricyclic antidepressants or our MAO inhibitors or whatever else. It's more effective if we can get them out into life and socializing with them. Invite them, be there with them, be kind for them, be their advocate, and maybe you'll need to be a little protective of someone who's bipolar, because we're all going to know even if we don't know.
Dr. Craig, what are your thoughts on detecting some of the early warning signs in peers, and what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's detected those early warning signs, and especially in a culture and a society where it's looked down upon to ask for help or to say that you need help?
For someone you know, the best indication is an inexplicable change in pattern. This person lived a calm, ordered life, and all of a sudden something's interrupting it. Something's going against the grain. They're no longer functioning in an orderly way like they were. And you can't help but question, what is happening in this person's life? And I can't help but pick up on what you've just said. There are many times, particularly for we men, we can grab our friend who we see that change and simply do something as simple as this. something that you physically enjoy doing, whether it's bike riding, swimming, throwing a baseball, shooting hoops, whatever you can identify with that you enjoy doing, say, come on, let's do this. And you go out and work together. And the very fact you're doing it may release some of their tension, but another thing that will do, it'll give you identity between the two of you. And you can build on that in conversation.
And also you can help the person. If somebody is, for example, without a job, if you even just pick up the paper, go on monster.com, whatever, and help them look for a job, even if you don't succeed, at least that person knows you care. At least they know you're trying. If they're having problems with their brother, maybe you could go to the brother and say, look, this is the guy who brought you here. You spent $14,000. I think you've got to drop this and let's make amends. Maybe bring them together. And if the person is obstinate, the brother is obstinate, maybe then help this person legally. Whenever you make the attempt to help, somebody knows that you care. Somebody cares besides, in this very cold world, there's somebody out there. That helps them right there, even if you don't succeed.
Yes, something else that you said, Doctor, just struck me. What the Prophet Muhammad went through in terms of his life, losing his wet nurse, losing his mother, losing his grandfather, losing all his support system, and yet he knew that Allah was present, and that was his guardian. I know a person who first lost his job. He then, within 12 months, he lost his job, he lost his father, then he lost his mother, then he lost his wife in 12 months. And a friend came to him and said, I don't understand, you're functioning. Why are you still functioning so well? He said, I'm functioning well because my eternal Father is here with me and knows my problem. And I think all too often we are reticent to point people to the ultimate solution. And the ultimate solution is continuously a spirit solution. And we see that in terms of the prophets so brilliantly, and we see it in terms of Judaism, and we see it in terms of Christianity. The life of the Spirit is fundamental to our ultimate health.
Go ahead.
Yeah, on the same point, I would like to comment. Do you think introducing some sort of pedagogical change to the curriculum at schools and college levels would help deal this problem? Because what we see that depression also throws kids and adults away from religion. They don't want to listen to it and they want to come towards God. But we have come to a conclusion that the more you're attached towards your Creator, the more you are safe. So do you think what can be done on these grounds?
Dr. Craig, since you're a professor, I think you would probably be best to answer that question. Are there any changes or developments that we can talk about in curriculum that are geared towards teaching the more spiritual aspect or to give some solutions?
Well, the course I teach at the college is called Death and Dying. The first assignment in that course is you write an essay this week that reviews all the feelings of loss that you've had in your entire life. Start in your childhood, in your early preschool, go through your high school, go through your early adult time, and list it all, starting with when you came down one morning when you were 4 years old and saw the goldfish floating at the top of the tank that you loved so dearly. Take each of those losses and put them down. And then we share those papers. What happens within a very short amount of time is that class is a community, because we're sharing our hurts and pains, but in the process of sharing it, we begin to share our love. We begin to share our humanity. And I've seen absolutely wonderful transformations with college kids simply out of the basic thing of sharing who they are.
I once heard Khalifa Rabi talk about depression with reference to Surah Al-Asr in the Holy Quran. Can you please help me understand the relationship between the two?
Yes, very correct there. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal asri innal insana lafi khusr. That in the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful, surely man is in a state of loss. By the fleeting time, surely man is in a state of loss. Time is very short. And because we waste our time in these diversions, as we mentioned about video games and electronics, we then see that there all are deviation in that way away from God and away from even humanity, but in these other diversions. Because of that, we are in a state of loss. We are in a state of depression. That state of loss is the depression. That's why it says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, except for those people who believe and do good works. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, and exhort others towards the truth and exhort others with perseverance. So if we had the perseverance instead of the video games, we would not have the depression. And that is why it is said again and again that قَالَ كَمْ لَبِسْتَ يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْدَ يَوْمٍ, that when the final day comes and you're asked, how long did you live on this earth? You will say, I was on the earth a day or a part of a day. So if we remember that our life here is very short, then we'll know to spend that time increasing our communication with our Creator and helping others out, because we don't have very much time to do it.
I've noticed this theme of religion coming along, and as well as that depression is a legitimate medical ailment and mental illness, not just something that, oh, you're feeling bad or just some kind of like a bad day. But I was just interested because you were talking about the science of it. How does the spirituality, like religious beliefs, how do they influence, like, for example, the neuroscience aspect of it? Like, is it an uplift? Is it?
When one thinks of positive thoughts or thoughts that reinforce them, the serotonin, dopamine, neurotransmitters are increased so that you feel better. Again, Dr. Craig mentioned touch. I am a nurse practitioner. I have a holistic practice, and a huge part of my practice is massage therapy for the relief of pain. When one touches the skin, one releases oxytocin. Oxytocin, some of you may know it if you've had wives who've had babies and they've been induced, and they put Pitocin up and they make them contract every 2 minutes. That's what makes women contract and go into labor, and that's what makes love. That's the neurotransmitter that has the feeling of love. It only comes about when you touch somebody. So you love those that you touch. Then we have low levels of serotonin and other neurotransmitters that are related to nutrition. You need B vitamins, C vitamins, and sunlight in order for your body to produce the neurotransmitters for you to be at a, I don't want to say homeostatic, because homeostatic actually means death. The only thing that's static is dead. But a homeodynamic level wherein you can flux between stress. You have enough of these neurotransmitters to be all right. Then when you have injury or pain, these same neurotransmitters, they're everywhere, they're all around us. When you have injury or pain, they're eaten up. They're used to eat the pain, so you become deficient. If you have an injury or an insult to your psyche or your body, they're actually used up and absorbed, and they become depleted. So and if you're too fatigued, you become stressed and restless and irritable and cranky and more susceptible to depression, because your body can't reproduce the chemicals that it needs to stay happy. If you have poor nutrition, you can't make the chemicals that you need. If you eat a lot of sugar, you may have the calories, but you don't have the holistic nutrition that you need from B vitamins and meat and protein and such to make the neurotransmitters. So it's pervasive in every part of our life, from eating well, to resting well, to exercising well, to touching well, and to being loved well, and to worshiping well. You can't get away from the fact that this is multifactorial, and we're never going to address it with a pill, or just therapy, or just one visit, or even, I hope that my God will forgive me when I say even with just one prayer. We need each other, we need our nutrition, and we need a holistic lifestyle that we're aware of, that this is upon us all, and where we're helping one another.
Just to start to, Dr. Lodin, did you have something to say?
Very correct. The only thing to say is that you can see some people can lie on a bed of nails. The control of the neurotransmitters is so great, and if you espouse to these things that Linda has mentioned, you could do that. Some people walk on hot coals and they don't feel the pain. So it's your ability to control or we call modulation of the receptors that allows you to do that.
Just want to turn it to the audience for any final thoughts, and we'll start off from the back here.
I have a question regarding the roots of depression. Before, Dr. Irfan, you were talking about neurotransmitters, and I wanted to ask if all cases of depression that we have seen or that we have diagnosed, do all of them have? Do all the people have chemical imbalances in the brain? Like, are all their serotonin levels down? Are all their norepinephrine levels down? And my other question is that, is the chemical imbalance in the brain the source of the depression, or does some outside stimulus, like an action or something they witness or some loss that they have, does that then trigger the chemical imbalance in the brain, which then makes them depressed?
Okay, these are very good questions. And the second one, I think when we discussed that multifactorial hit there is definitely both factors. Now, we're not doing a biopsy on all of these patients and measuring the amount of neurotransmitters, but we know through our studies that there are lower levels of serotonin and lower levels of dopamine, norepinephrine. Now, whether everybody who has lower levels will have depression, that's not true. There are many people who do, and that's where we discussed about the spirituality and about the working as a community. That increases your strength in terms of mental strength, in terms of your neuronal activity, and you may even be predisposed to depression or some of these psychological conditions, but because of that, these social factors and your social strength, you're able to overcome that. So it is true, you can be predisposed and not be affected. You could then not be predisposed and be affected because you're not enjoying spirituality, you're not enjoying unity with or love of one's creator, and then even though you weren't predisposed, you would develop the pathology. So that's why both things involved.
So with that, I'd just like to get some of the closing remarks from our panelists. Dr. Craig, if you'd start us off.
I think the thing I would hope that we could go away from today, all of us in the room and all of us who are listening and hearing this from the video, we all have a part to play. Not only a part to play in our own life and our own health, but a part to play in this world in which we live. We are participants and active participants in the game. And by acknowledging that and practicing it, we'll build a healthier world.
Thank you very much.
And it says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And we have not created jinn and man except for the worship of God. Because we have these diversions and we moved away from that, then we fall into losses and depression. But if as it is, the Prophet Messiah said, our paradise is our God. If we had focused on that paradise, we'd always be in paradise. There'd be no room for depression. So may God help us that way.
And that brings us to a close to this episode of Real Talk USA. I'd like to thank our panelists for their time and for the audience for a great discussion. Feel free to visit us online at www.mta.tv/realtalk and feel free to follow us on Twitter. With that, Assalamu alaikum.